Pitt's really going full in on the transfer market, huh? Derek Kyler, Dartmouth quarterback, commits as a graduate transfer. We'll talk about him. We'll also talk about them hosting C'Bo Flemister, running back transfer from Notre Dame, on an official visit. Pitt's still looking to add some transfers, and Rivals just released their recruiting rankings. And folks, they disrespect Pitt quarterback commit Kenny Minchey. We'll talk about why they're wrong and what needs to change there for Minchey to get his proper respect. That's all coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast.
Are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast, your daily podcast covering the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Nick Faribault. Folks, as always, thank you for making the Locked On Pitt podcast your first listen every day. If you are watching this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all those great stuff. Put on the notification bell. Folks, if you are listening to this, make sure to leave a review. You can listen wherever you want, Odyssey, Apple, Spotify, wherever you may want to listen, we are on there. So make sure to check us out. And hey, somehow, some way, it's never down season here in the Pitt football calendar. And years past right now, we'd be talking about just hypotheticals and what might be happening and what could happen and all this different type of stuff, but not this year. It just feels like every time I want to talk about something for next year, maybe with next year's team, what about the defensive line or the corner room or whatever? I've wanted to cover these things, and I just never can because something keeps happening, whether it's in football, whether the basketball team, which has really picked up some momentum recently in terms of their commitments, whether they're getting something going on. There's so much that feels like it's spinning around in my head right now. There's so much that's happening, and there's just so much momentum behind this Pitt football team right now. So many guys committing, so much happening, so many good things happening. They are completely being praised with great things nationally that I haven't even mentioned on here that I would like to talk about, right? I would like to talk about their preseason ranking, but they keep getting commitments like this. Derek Kyler, Dartmouth quarterback, commits to Pitt. He was on an official visit earlier this week, and he pulled the trigger right away. So he is going to come to Pitt. And this is really interesting to me because we've been talking about this a little bit. That, yeah, the cornerback room is pretty good right now, right? You like what you have in Keaton Slovis and Nick Patty. It's good as the top two as Pitt's had, really ever in the past decade. When you look at some of the rooms they've had, to have two guys like that at the top of your list, I think you'll take a lot of peace in that, right? You have Keaton Slovis, who has proven to be a really good quarterback before, just had a really bad year last year. Maybe he can turn that around. And then you have Nick Patty, who I really think, I really do believe, and I say this all the time, this is a player that is really good. And I'm very convinced of that. I've watched enough Nick Patty tape to say that this guy's a good quarterback. And if Keaton Slovis gets hurt or he doesn't play to expectations, and this team's going to have someone to lean back on and say, we got this. We got a guy here. It's not just going to be completely a fervor and you're going to be completely lost. But there is a depth problem, I think, here. You lost Joey Yellen, Davis Bevel. They transfer out, which, again, was expected, right? Pretty expected for those guys to leave. But you didn't land anyone in the class of 2022 a quarterback, which is by design. Didn't feel like Pitt was in on many. But Nate Yarnell has been injured. He hurt his foot last year around the time of the Georgia Tech game, so around October-ish. And he's been rehabbing ever since. Missed spring ball, didn't play in the spring game. And behind them, it's the walk-ons. It's Eli Kasanovich, it's Jake Frankel. So there was not a lot of quarterback depth on this team. And I think that is a legitimate gripe to have is what in the world? What happens if we got to be real here? Is it likely Eric Kyler's going to play? Probably not, right? He's probably not going to play. He's probably the third string quarterback right now. But we got to think about the doomsday scenario because Nate Yardell has a Liz Frank injury, which can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. So will he be ready for the year? I don't know. But we need to be prepared for doomsday, which is what happens if Keaton Slovis and Nick Patty both get hurt early in the year, and then Nate Yardell maybe isn't ready, or he is hurt still, or whatever? You need to have someone there. You need to have another scholarship quarterback. And Derek Kyler is going to be that guy here. And so, a guy that gives you that veteran option at that QB3 spot that I think makes you a lot more comfortable just in case of that doomsday scenario. You need to have some depth here in this quarterback room. And I think this is what Kyler adds. Very efficient player. And I think this is the big thing. Such an efficient type of player that's willing to come in right away and make the throws you want. 42 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions will stand out. A very smart player. A guy that's not going to put up a ton of big plays, but can run your offense and do it well. Very smart player as well, obviously in the Ivy Leagues. Decently mobile, can move a little bit, so you can move him outside the pocket, go on some bootleg action. You can trust him to run a little bit. A guy that's maybe not legs first, but can do it. And so I think that'll look good on his resume. But this is a guy that's going to help bridge your gap, right? Until next season. And you're going to like that fact that Derek Kyler can come in and run your offense and learn it quickly. Very bright player. A guy that has learned the ins and outs of a few different offenses at Dartmouth, and a guy that has run an offense at a high level with efficiency. That's what you look for in your QB3, right? You're not looking for the next superstar here. We're looking for a guy that, in case Nick Patty and Keaton Slovis somehow get hurt, Nate Yarnell is not ready for whatever reason, that you have someone right there that you could say, okay, I can comfortably turn to him and he can be, the calming factor. And I think that's something to look at, that veteran presence. He'll be able to help you in preparation for games. He'll be able to help you in game weeks. And he will certainly be able to give you that kind of just relief in a pinch if you need him to as that QB3 spot. No one's going to expect him to be a world beater here. But you needed some depth here, and I think he's going to add that. I think he's the type of player you want, a guy that's not going to hurt you, right? In your backup quarterbacks, what are you trying to look for? You're trying to look for a guy that knows what he's doing with his reads. You're trying to look for a guy that's not going to kill you, and you're just going to try to look for a guy that you can game manage your way through. And I think this is the type of guy Derek Kyler is. He's not going to kill you. Get that 42 to 6 touchdown interception ratio, sticks out, efficient passer that has over a 75% completion percentage. Not going to be a big play hunter, but a guy that really just does what he's asked of and does it at a high level and will be able to really take care of your offense and say, okay, I'm the quarterback 3. I can come in and offer just a little bit of stability for you whenever you need. And I think that's the big thing here with Derek Kyler. That's why I think this is a solid move, and he really needed that. I think quarterback depth was definitely a question of this team. Keaton Slovis, an often injured guy who has had injuries throughout his career, and Nick Patty's coming off that broken collarbone. It's not crazy to think that that could happen. Pitt's been very lucky in recent years with the lack of quarterback injuries. Kenny Pickett has been pretty remarkably healthy outside of that 2020 season when he had that high ankle sprain. He was pretty healthy throughout his career. Even before that, Peterman was pretty healthy. So they had a pretty healthy quarterback room for the most part over really the last decade. Really, no major quarterback injuries that they've had. Max Brown is the one that comes to mind as a major quarterback injury they've had to deal with in recent years, if you will. But they haven't really had to dealt with that much. So just in case of that doomsday scenario, now they have a guy that can stabilize kind of the offense, be a game manager, and get you where you need to go maybe until one of those guys comes back. And I think that's a big thing to have. But I want to talk about C'Bo Flemister here, the potential running back transfer. Then I want to get into Kenny Minchey because I really think that this is kind of egregious on the part of rivals here. But first, let me let you know about BetOnline because BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL conference finals, MLB, and of course, all the fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline should continue to source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website that airs your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast, everybody. And we're talking here about these transfer candidates. One of them already committed in Derek Kyler. And now, C'Bo Flemister, the potential transfer from Notre Dame. And this goes hand in hand to a degree with some other news we got earlier about Jordan Bailey, 2022 commit rather, that signed his letter of intent, decommitted, came back on due to some academic issues, but they laid out a plan for him to become eligible. It feels like that did not go to plan, and thus he cannot come in, and he will not enroll at Pitt. And that's an issue. And this is the second time now in the past two recruiting classes that Pitt has lost one of their running back commits. They lost Malik Newton last year due to being deemed medically ineligible. And they also lost now Jordan Bailey due to academic ineligibility. This is a serious issue, right? This is a serious issue in terms of running back depth. And you look at the running back depth and you say, okay, it looks good, right? It's a very good group. You have four guys that you really trust. In Vincent Davis, Izzy Abanikanda, Daniel Carter, and Rodney Hammond. So you really do trust them. And for good reason. I mean, really. But behind them, there's not much. And four scholarship running backs, one of which is really a fullback running back. Daniel Carter looked amazing in the spring. Of course, he won that most improved player and was great in the spring game. He was the star of the spring game offensively. But let's take a step back here. This is kind of similar to that quarterback question, right? It's like the what if. Is four running backs enough? Especially for a guy like Izzy who's been able to get hurt. Vincent Davis is a smaller guy. Hammond was banged up a little bit. Carter's been banged up. All these guys have had some run-ins with some nicks here and there. And so you don't want to be too worried about your depth, but I think you got to be just a little bit. And you got to say, okay, this is a little bit worrying for us. With a few injuries here or there could really set us back. The running back depth isn't great, and we've lost two of our running back recruits in the past 2 years. Now that changes kind of the makeup of what the 23 and 24 classes could be. I think you could take multiple running backs this year and multiple running backs next year. You got a lot of turnover. I also think C'Bo Flemister is interesting in this regard with 2 years of eligibility left, that he's got the opportunity maybe next year to take a big step up in terms of his usage here. Because Daniel Carter is a redshirt junior, Vincent Davis is a senior, Izzy's a junior, Hammond's a sophomore. Izzy has a good year, could potentially go to the NFL. That's certainly possible. Vincent Davis has a good year, another guy that could go to the NFL. You never know if there's a transfer in this group. You could have all four back, but Flemister with 2 years of eligibility also gives you that bridge gap. So he's essentially another recruit to get you through this year and the next year. And he's a guy that hasn't played a ton at Notre Dame. So you don't have a crazy resume to go off of with C'Bo Flemister. But I think what he does is what you need. And that is, takes care of the football really well, runs with really good power, tough player, decent burst right off the line, and short yardage areas is where he really kind of came up over his career. The guy's a really tough runner, though, always falling forward, can really make things happen in that regard. Tough football player. And so you really like that. You really like to see that. Just a mean dude. Has a few really good trucks and broken tackles over his career against ACC opponents as well that really pop out to you on tape. So I think C'Bo Flemister would give you some nice depth here that would make some sense. And he's a guy that could really kind of bring it back in that regard to the depth and say, okay, we feel good about our running back depth now because we have this guy who has proven to be decent enough at Notre Dame, has reps, he's a tough runner. He's a guy that we like in these short yardage areas. And if there is an injury that ever happens, we think he can come in right away and be a really good player for us. And I think that's something that will definitely stick out about C'Bo Flemister and why they like him. So would make sense to me as another ad if they could potentially get him on board. I think it makes complete sense to me in that regard. So the running back room again, I think it's really good. I think they have one of the better running back rooms in the ACC. But there's that depth question again, and yeah, we can play this game really for anything. You can never have enough depth though on the college football team. You really can't. And quarterback and running back are kind of two of those positions where you like what you have at the top, but very quickly could diminish if you have some injury scenarios. And Pitt ran into this last year at receiver, where they had a lot of injuries at receiver, and it was just devastating. And eventually it just piled up. So you saw how many receivers they were starting to stack up. Then Jordan Addison leaves, and it's kind of a gut punch. And you could see them maybe adding another receiver as well to this room. So they're trying to add guys. They add two tight ends, for example. That's not by coincidence, right? They add two tight ends for a reason. So they are trying to add as much depth across this team as they possibly can. Look at how many linebackers they were in on. Shane Simon and Tyler Wills will come, but they talk to a lot more linebackers than that. Now they feel good about their depth at, corner, safety, D line, O line. I think they should feel good about those spots as well. But this is really kind of the making of the team, and I think C'Bo Flemister really shores up that running back position just in case there is a doomsday scenario there as well. And maybe he could even get in there a little bit if he proves to be good enough throughout summer camp. I think there's an opportunity there where he has flashed enough power and athleticism to where he could potentially surprise a few people throughout summer camp. All right, folks, I want to shift over to Kenny Minchey right now. We got to talk about this because this is egregious stuff from Rivals and the rankings that they have. But first, let's go to a quick break. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. And we are talking here a little bit about Kenny Minchey now and his lack of recruiting boost in the land of the Rivals land. Now, to start off here, I don't really like doing this because I don't like kind of just sitting down on a recruiting service and saying, man, those rankings suck. I don't agree with them. However, this one in particular, it's such a sore thumb in regard to kind of how he is ranked elsewhere. So let me just give this to you, kind of out there. Kenny Minchey thought to be a 4-star by On Three. He's the 13th best quarterback in the nation, according to them. Makes sense to me. According to 24/7 Sports, he is a 4-star, the 19th best quarterback in the nation. Again, that makes sense. So when you look at that, he's a consensus 4-star. That's what Kenny Minchey is. This guy's a consensus 4-star. But Rivals, now releasing their new quarterback rankings, actually drops him down in the state to the 27th player in the state. He is no lower than 6th elsewhere. In the other recruiting services, he's only a 5.6 3-star. Remember, that is the middle tier for 3 stars. 5.7 is the high tier. So he's not even a high 3-star. This is a guy that dropped in the state rankings, is not a top 25 quarterback, is only a 5.6 Rivals rating in terms of 3 stars, and he's an Elite 11 quarterback, finalist, and is a consensus 4-star elsewhere. I mean, this is kind of insane. Because again, he's a top 25 quarterback elsewhere, an Elite 11 finalist, a consensus 4-star. They are standing on their legs here about Kenny Minchey. I mean, let's just say that. They are putting their neck out on the line. This is a crazy diversion from what everyone else is saying about him right now. Thought of as a top 25 quarterback on other sites, a consensus 4-star, and everything about him says this guy's good. So you watch his tape right away, and boy, there are a lot of things that stick out about this guy. The touch he has on his deep throws for his age, crazy. Compact release, has a little bit to work on with his footwork, but this is a player, man. He looks good. Natural arm talent is all there. He's got good arm talent. You can see that from a mile away. The velocity he has, it's all there. This dude has a live arm. And I think that's something that really sticks out to me about him. He really is just one of those guys to me that sticks out as a really good foundational player right now. He's got a lot of the basic stuff you look for. He's a good athlete, has a good arm, pretty good mechanics for where he's at right now. Yeah, he'll have to work on some things, but I think he's actually pretty good in that area right now, and he has a willingness to really rip the ball down the field. And he's a guy that understands coverages at a high level. And you heard, John Garcia Jr. come on here a little bit ago talking about Kenny Minchey, and he said this. This is a guy that's a calming presence. The players love playing with this guy because what he brings to the table is a leadership style. He's a gravitational type of player. He's a guy that will go out of his way and correct someone if they're doing something wrong. He's a guy that knows the playbook in and out. So you can always go to him with questions. He's a guy that knows the ins and outs of what he's supposed to do, and he's a calming force. He's a calming force. This is a guy that to me sounds like a much more high-level player than what he is rated at. It's such an outlier to me. That it just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. How does he drop after getting the Elite 11 invitation? That is a prestigious invitation. So it really is hard to kind of feel like he's not being slighted a little bit here. This is a good quarterback that Rivals is really taking a stand on. And it really is kind of like, what in the world is going on here? I think that Minchey is the type of guy that comes in here though and has a potential to, he has the potential to start very early in his career. I truly believe that. This is a good player. And Rivals has been historically not great at the quarterback evaluation. 24/7 has been a lot better at that. Rivals certainly has its booms, right? It certainly has its good things that they do well. They evaluate receivers very well. They evaluate linebackers and corners very well. So there are things that they do really, really well. But the bigger thing here is that I just don't see how you can stand out so far on that leg and actually drop him in the rankings. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, just from a pure standpoint of he's got the honors, he's got the tape, he's played well at camps. There's a lot there that doesn't make a lot of sense or add up here with the Kenny Minchey ranking. All right, folks, as always, thanks for listening. Tomorrow we're going to be back. We're probably going to talk a little bit more about Pitt recruiting and the type of blocks they're kind of recruiting right now. I think it's a very interesting topic to break down. Folks, as always, thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. And as always, hail to Pitt.